talk to you today about building your infrastructure, how to build your momentum, how to sustain that momentum. So how many of you have heard of PBIS before? Good, you're at the right conference. That works out. So how many of you are already implementing PBIS, meaning you have already gotten some type of formal training? Raise your hand. I have to put my glasses on. All right. Good, good, good. How many of you are getting ready to go to training? Raise your hand. Okay. And how many of you are still thinking about it? You're going to wait and see how today goes. All right, I'll check back in with those folks. Okay, so I see we've got full school teams here. This team here, this elementary school in the red, you guys stood out to me right away. You brought the right amount of people. You found out the right amount of chairs that took up the whole row. So, great job. Kudos to you guys. There's another whole school team I see back there, unless you guys just all coincidentally wore the same color turquoise. So, all right, awesome. Good to see you guys too. I love that school spirit. I know a lot of you are here with school teams already, but it's great to see that school spirit. It's one thing I love about coming to El Paso. I've only been here twice. This is my second visit. And just know that the landscape's a lot different here than in Florida. The temperature's about the same, but I have better hair here than I do in Florida. So, but one thing I was telling somebody who picked me up this morning, Angela Owens, she's new to Region 19, and I had said to her, the people here seem genuinely sincere. And I said, I know that's somewhat redundant of a statement, but they truly are kind. And every single person I've met in my 2 visits here, every single person has been truly kind. So I'm assuming you guys all are going to continue that. Well, I'll find out today. I'm collecting data on that. All right, so let's talk about overall the big ideas. Okay, PBIS is an evidence-based framework. It's important. We need a vision to guide us in what we're doing. And I'm going to have you guys spend time today thinking about what is your vision? What is your vision for your child? What is your vision for your students in your classroom? And what is your vision for your school? What is your vision for your community in working with your school? And oftentimes we don't stop enough to say, what is our vision? Because if we don't have a clear vision, it's going to be really difficult for us to develop goals. Okay, we're so focused on how well we're going to do on the STAR. Isn't that it? Is that correct? I'm getting my states correct on all their comprehensive assessment. We get so caught on the test and how we're going to do, and that's how all the evaluation happens, that we don't have a chance to sit back and go, wait a minute, what do we envision? So we're going to talk about that this morning. Implementation with fidelity does achieve outcomes. I'm going to show you I have 10 years worth of data in Florida to show that if you implement PBIS with fidelity, as the BOQ is intended, you will realize outcomes. If you self-inflate your scores on the BOQ and think yourself is better, your school is doing better than they truly are, your data will not back that up. Okay, we have 10 years of data to show that. Sustainability is absolutely essential for long-term change. I want you to think about those of you who have gone through 2 days of training and plus additional days of training. Think of how much time that took, the effort you put in afterwards to get PBIS up and rolling in your school and your district. And the last thing you want is to have to repeat that and do it again. Scale up will happen whether you want it or not. And there's 2 different ways we'll talk about scale up. Scale up means scaling up within our school, and scale up means scaling out across our district. It's going to snowball. People are going to hear great things that are happening. They're going to want it. And infrastructure keeps the motor running. So we're going to talk about all of those within my hour and 15 minutes with you. And I can talk fast. All right. We know that traditional discipline versus PBIS. When a student misbehaves, we want the behavior to stop, right? It's okay to say yes, because that's the answer, right? We do want it to stop. PBIS takes it a step further in that we want to alter the environment because we want to prevent that from happening again. We want to teach the skill that they need to have so that they don't engage in that behavior again. But oftentimes we get so bogged down, it's human nature, we've got a lot of extra demands put on us these days. We get bogged down, we stop to go, wait a minute, how can I prevent this from happening again? A lot of us fall into that old school thinking how all of us were raised, if we're just punished enough, that'll teach us not to do it again. Is that working? No. And did it truly work back then? For the most part, no, it didn't. A lot of us tend to have nostalgic thinking going, but it did. When my mom got that wooden spoon out, man, that changed my behavior. But how many times was that spoon used? That just told you it didn't really change your behavior, okay? So, again, I shouldn't be talking about corporal punishment, but it just came out. All right, teaching appropriate skills. We need to teach the appropriate skills, the expected behavior we want of students. We want to reward students, acknowledge them when they display the expected behavior. We want to let them know, yes, thank you for sitting in your seats. Thank you for facing forward, your eyes on me, your mouth's quiet while I'm talking. I appreciate that. That's being respectful, that's being responsible so that you're able to learn. We need to have that information back to them. And we've got to use our data to determine which students may need additional support. So what is PBIS? It's Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports. We're talking about the application of these evidence-based strategies. I'm going to have to read this because I'm going to mess it up. I've been up since 4, Eastern time. It's different. So I'm going on to lunch right now for y'all. All right. We're looking at improving the academic performance of students, enhancing school safety, decreasing problem behavior, establishing positive school cultures through a multi-tiered behavioral framework. Sometimes we refer to this multi-tiered behavioral framework as MTSS. Okay? Please know that MTSS does not replace PBIS. MTSS does not replace RTI. You all heard those terms, right? Okay, MTSS is a process that's engaged throughout PBIS and RTI. And let's talk about what that looks like and where it came from. So multi-tiered systems of support came out of actually the Center of Disease Control. So what do we need to do for universal precautions to prevent getting sick? We wash our hands, okay? And at least in the women's bathroom here, I happened to check it out, there's a big bottle of soap. And you push on the soap, and it actually has not just all employees must wash their hands. It's all employees must wash their hands and arms for 20 seconds and rinse off thoroughly before going back to work. I was like, wow. If I had my phone with me, I would have taken that picture. Because that was one of the most specific rules that were stated in the restroom. Okay, because sometimes we say, okay, now let's do the happy birthday song when you wash your hands. We teach our children that, right? That's a universal intervention. That is a tier 1 intervention. We need to wash our hands to prevent getting sick. But do some people still get sick even after they wash hands? Yes, they do. So you may need to go to the doctor. You may need some medicine. That is a tier 2 intervention. Do you stop washing your hands while you're taking medicine? No. You've got to keep the tier 1 intervention going. You've got to keep washing your hands. But you've got to have something on top of it, some medicine on top of it to treat, because you are not being able to respond to just washing your hands. You've got to treat this infection. Now what happens if that medicine doesn't work and you have to go to the doctor or the hospital? Do you stop washing your hands? Do you stop taking the medicine? No. So if you have to go to the hospital after you've done all that stuff, that is a tier 3 intervention. Ooh, mood lighting. Just as we talked about from the Center of Disease Control. Perfect. So let's talk about, we're washing our hands. You're going to the doctor, you're taking medicine, and you go to the doctor. That is a multi-tiered systems approach. Okay, so just remember, just because you're in the hospital, they are still making sure they're washing their hands before they treat you. That's for sure. I want you to think about the same way for behavior. Okay, when we're looking at our students, we're looking at providing PBIS, that universal Tier 1 intervention for all. We're teaching them the expected behaviors. We're acknowledging them when they display those expected behaviors. We're correcting them when they do engage in problematic behavior. We're doing that for all, but some students need a little bit more. So those students may need social skills training, anger management training, how to work through their emotions, identify feelings. They still need access to that Tier 1 system. But then there's students that may need more intensive, and they may need to have an individual goal or individualized education plan. Just because they're receiving Tier 3 services, though, does not mean that they're special education. It means they just need more intensive services to work with them. All right, so we thought this was a good idea on the national level. We liked the Center for Disease Control. We thought, let's see if that works in education, and Hill Walker was one of the first to come up with it. What we decided to do, though, is to help folks understand in education what are the various activities that you engage in on a school campus across the tiers. But the problem is these big lines here that separated the tiers actually gave the notion of what? Placement. So it meant that if you don't do well in Tier 1, you move to Tier 2, but then you're stuck in the yellow. It meant you didn't have access to Tier 1, and that's not what we meant. So we switched the triangle, came up with this triangle. And the idea behind this triangle is because RTI was getting a lot of momentum, okay? And people were saying, I can't do PBIS anymore because we're forced to do RTI. Okay, no different than I can't do PBIS anymore because we have to do MTSS. Don't fall for that. Just know it's another acronym, okay? What's important here is we wanted to demonstrate that this multi-tiered behavior framework works for reading too. It works for academics, any academics. Think about a student that's taught reading. We have large group instruction for reading, but students that aren't responding well to reading, they get additional supports. They get tutoring or they get pull-out with groups of students. Do they still access the large group instruction during that time? Yes. They just get supplemental minutes added on top of that large group instruction. But then students that still aren't responding may get the one-on-one tutoring with that. But they're still accessing the supplemental, they're still accessing their large group instruction. So the same is true for behavior on the other side. And what this was supposed to demonstrate is that this multi-tiered framework applies to both the academics and behavior. But the downfall that we split it down the middle, unfortunately, is that gave the notion that there are two camps. And it helped this siloed effect to say the academic folks stay over here and the behavior folks stay over here. But what happens in practice? It's the same kids we're talking about, right? We don't know what came first, the behavior or the academic deficit. So then the other thing we tried to put behind this notion of a multi-tiered framework is to let people know that it's not, because we started to hear, oh, it's a yellow kid, it's a red kid, it's a Tier 2 kid, it's a Tier 3 kid. It's like, no, we need to move away. It's not about labeling people, it's about labeling behavior. And in fact, the same kid can have all types of levels of interventions and supports depending on the needs that they have. I want you to think back, say, in your 7th grade, where did you struggle first? This is not my graph, but it probably could have been at one point. But I had struggled at math. Did that mean I was a Tier 3 kid? I needed intensive interventions for everything? No, it meant I needed a tutor during 7th grade to help me with math. And then once I was able to build those skills, I went back to no longer needing a tutor and the Tier 1 intervention. So our students move up and down throughout this triangle. It also could be what's happening at home, there could be a divorce, there could be a death, there could be sicknesses. That's going to affect behavior. That doesn't mean that's the student. So we tend to see our students move up and down like a lava lamp. That just dates me right there. And how many of you thought cool, right? Yes, exactly. All right. So in Florida, we have this is our version of the triangle of a multi-tiered system of support. We've got the academic and behavior integrated. We no longer have lines because students move throughout this continuum of support, but regardless of where they are, we're using our our data to identify the problems, come up with strategies to solve those problems, collect the data and determine how well we are doing with those interventions. Are they responding to those interventions that we came up with? So essentially, I want you guys to remember, Tier 1 is for everybody. And when I'm talking everybody, you can apply this at a systems level too. So superintendents, principals out there, principals, think about this. Tier 1 is all of your teachers, all of your classrooms. For teachers, Tier 1 is all of your students in your classroom. For superintendents, Tier 1 is all of your schools. Okay? Now Tier 2, remember, sits on top. It's supplemental, it's in addition to. Okay, districts, I want you to think about superintendents. Which of your schools need a little bit more support from your district office? Based upon student need, based upon their test scores, whatever it is, lack of resources. That's how you start to allocate your supports. Classroom teachers, you're going to think about which students are not responding well to your large group instruction that need a little bit additional support. And then there's, on top of it, Tier 3, the individual students in the classroom that need the most intensive support. You set up an individual goal and watch to see, are they making progress towards building that skill that you're focusing on. For superintendents, it's looking at, this is the school that has the highest need for us. We need to provide the most supports. For principals out there, I want you to think these are the teachers that need the most supports from us. Either they need more training, either they need more support when we need to go in to look at the scheduling issues, or we need to figure out how we can be successful. We also look at this as a national level. We have in our minds, in different states that I work with, I have states that fall all across the continuum of support at different times. That's how you start to work smarter and allocate your resources based upon the data. All right, so I want you guys to think about this shift. How can we move away from what about the students is causing the performance discrepancy and move into thinking about what about the interaction of the curriculum, the instruction, the learners, and the learning environment that needs to be altered so that all students will learn. That shifts everything. Okay, because keep in mind, just because we get them in their seats, there's no research to support they're going to improve their academics. We've got to pair it with good teaching. And just because we have good teaching doesn't always guarantee they will always be in their seats. It increases the likelihood. We do have research on that, but it doesn't guarantee it's going to improve every single behavior outcome. So we've got to pair the two. So Winston Churchill once said, we shape our buildings, thereafter they shape us. And I want you to think about how you're shaping your school building. So let's look at this revised approach to discipline, because discipline by definition does not mean punishment. Discipline by definition means to shape, to instruct, to mold to one's liking. So I want you to think about what is it that starts to get into some of the vision. What is it that you would like to see in your students? Or principals, you might think, what is it that you'd like to see in your teachers? And superintendents, you might think, what is it that you'd like to see in your principals? Okay, nobody's exempt from this at all. So how can we address our students' comprehensive needs through shared responsibility? It's going to take that team approach. How can we ensure that each student is healthy, safe, engaged, supported, and challenged? And how can we set the standard for comprehensive, sustainable school improvement that's going to provide our long-term success for us? All right, let's look at also how we can change the conversation. Let's move it from a focus that's narrowly defined on academic achievement. How do we prepare our kids to compete in the 21st century global marketplace? Or what will ensure that our graduates will have command of basic skills? What's wrong with these statements? Because technically they sound all right, don't they? Because it means success. According to what? Success on the test. But does that make you a quality person? Let's move it to What qualities do we want to encourage in our children as they grow towards adulthood? Okay, that includes the academics, but what do you need to be a person? I always say go to the mall and find out the people who didn't develop those qualities. Not in El Paso, because everybody's pretty kind. But come to Florida, they're all hanging out in the mall. Okay? There's not a whole lot of the happy, helpful, patient, grateful folks there that hang out in the mall in Florida. All right. Disney World's another great place, too. It's supposed to be the land of happy place, but by 3 o'clock and all the kids are past their nap, it's not happy anymore. Okay? So, and I wonder from some of those adults, how well did you do on your state test? Because obviously there's some qualities that hadn't been developed here. All right, not to say that because I was one of those parents at one point. So I think you should be more explicit here in step 2. And here it says, then a miracle occurs. You don't want that to happen, though, at your school or within your district. So what are the goals of positive behavior support? We want to build an effective, positive school environment that increases school safety. We want to improve the academic and behavioral outcomes of all students. And we want to prevent and reduce these problem behaviors because we're going to use that collaborative, team-based approach. We are going to develop effective instruction and interventions, and we're going to teach and reinforce and enhance the social-emotional learning for meaningful and durable lifestyle outcomes of our students. What your results will be. I want you to think about it for your school. If you've already engaged in PBIS, and if you haven't engaged in PBIS yet, haven't gone through training yet, I want you to think about where are you in this this grid, these questions, because that'll help determine how much work you're going to have to do. So are 80% of your students receiving 0 to 1 referral? Okay. Has your school experienced reductions in discipline incidents? Is your school experiencing increased instructional time? Is your emphasis on prevention, or are you stuck in that reaction mode, which often a lot of us get stuck in? Are you actively teaching and acknowledging the expected behaviors throughout the school year? It's not just a beginning of the school year event. Does your school have an efficient system to address behavior incidents? And does your team use data at least monthly to make decisions? If you can say yes to all these, I would say, yep, you probably have PBIS up and rolling on your campus. You probably have done pretty well and have a high score on your BOQ. If you can say no, don't worry, there's always things that we can improve. But we need to know what it is we need to improve so that we can truly improve it. All right, so the core principles of PBIS, like I said, that team process with structured problem solving. There's facilitated leadership. There's the school, district, and state action plan. And you've got to have an action plan guide your activities and what you guys are doing. There's database problem solving and your progress monitoring. So in those monthly meetings you're having with your teams, you're looking at your data and determining how well things are going. And if they're not going so well, you come up with interventions, you let your faculty know, you test it out, you collect more data on it, and you let them know, did it work? There's flexibility in the fidelity of implementation, meaning what fits your school? What is the culture of your school? What is the culture you want at your school? That's going to make it unique. Remember, PBIS is a framework. It's a process that we engage in, but it's not a packaged curriculum. So therefore, I can't just say, do this what's in this box exactly the same way, because this school here, you guys are going to be a lot different than the folks in the turquoise shirts back there, right? You guys are like, yep, we are different. All right, it's good to be proud. Working smarter, not harder, and again, emphasizing prevention, teaching, and effective consequences. So what kinds of solutions can we have? Because honestly, if we change the way you look at things, the things you look at start to change. All right, talk about classic flexibility of implementation. Here it is, right now live, okay? So you're at the slide. Let's talk about vision. Your vision is your ability to see. And sometimes this is hard when we get stuck into doing the day-to-day, the tasks we have to do. I know I have task lists. I want you to think, step back for a minute and go, wait a minute. What would I love to see happen on my school campus? What would I love to see in my students within my classroom? For superintendents, I want you to think, what would I love to see in my administrators? Okay, step back, something that you can imagine. And that's where sometimes people start to laugh and go, but it's not possible. Don't let those barriers shut down your vision. You've got to have a vision to start to develop. Based upon that vision, we move into establishing our school culture. And from our school culture, that's where you're starting to develop what's going to be the common language across everybody. What's going to be that common experience we want them to have. What's going to be the common vision and values. What do you value at your school? And that is what is going to be taught and reinforced as you go, day to day, on your school campus. So thinking about your vision, how do you start coming up with that? Well, think about what's currently happening on your school campus. What's working? What strengths do you have already? Okay? What's not working? How can it be better? All right? And then what are some of the barriers that you do have? Because we'll work on developing some goals to get around that, which leads into your goals. So what would you like to see in 5 years? Okay? What would you like to see in 3 years? And what would you like to see in 1 year? And you can even be as personal. For you as classroom teachers, you can even see, in 1 year, I would like to see that this many of my students are reading at this type of level, or this many of my students have applied for college, or this many of my students weren't sent to the office because they stayed on task. Oh, that's a good sign. Okay, now let's watch the video. It's only about 5 minutes, okay?
The social challenges that face modern societies, whether it's the ability to work productively, to be a good citizen, stay healthy, have their roots in early health and development. A strong foundation in early childhood results in much better and more effective development later. A weak foundation really puts us behind. The most important thing children need to thrive is to live in an environment of relationships that begins in their family, but also extends out to include adults who are family members in child care centers and other programs. What children need is for that entire environment of relationships to be invested in their healthy development. We've shown from decades of testing interventions that we can improve outcomes. But the magnitude of those impacts is not good enough. Science is now available to help us think about what we might do that would have a bigger impact than the best of what we've done before. So we began to ask, what could we be doing differently? What could we do to be smarter? Children who are at the greatest risk for the poorest outcomes in learning and health and behavior are children who experience a pile-up, a cumulative burden of one after another of risk factors. And then the burden is more than any child could be expected to overcome. So we began to focus on the development of the adults. What could we be doing to strengthen the capacity of everyone who interacts with children? This led us to think about the kinds of skills you need to deal with adversity. These skills of focusing attention, planning, monitoring, delaying gratification, being able to solve problems, being able to work in teams, executive function and self-regulation. They're also the kind of skills you need to create a well-regulated home and school environment in which healthy development and learning can take place. And then brain science started to tell us that differences in those skills start to develop in infancy based on the environment kids live in. So how do those skills get built? Well, if you don't develop them early, how do you develop them later? Actually, you can build them later because the period of flexibility and plasticity for this part of the brain doesn't fully mature until age 25 to 30. And then the light bulb went on. The reason we're not getting a bigger impact is not because we don't know about how to influence development, but because we're giving information and advice to people who we need to do active skill building with. Skill building by coaching, by training, by practice, but we're not doing that. So we now have developed this theory of change that says we need to focus on the development of the adults who are important in kids' lives.
So try this.
How does that work?
That's a new idea. Buen trabajo.
We need to focus on their skills, their needs, in order for them to be better, more effective parents, in order for them to be better prepared to be employable, which would enhance the economic stability of the family, which is also good for children. Second of all, we looked at many people in preschool programs and childcare centers. And we said, what are we doing to build those skills in the providers? They need skill building as well. And also the community can help to build and reinforce the capacities that parents need. And the community also includes programs in which the people who work in the programs have sufficient skills. Third of all, what are the major sources of toxic stress in this community, and how can we reduce them? Moving it up to a policy level, how are our policies strengthening communities' abilities to reduce sources of toxic stress and caregivers' abilities to provide what kids need? The development of our human capital is our future. The development of a productive workforce is our future. The development of a healthy population is our future. This kind of future orientation is critical for a healthy society. It's critical for a thriving business. It's critical for successful environmental relationships to raise children. It's all about being able to plan for the future, to have a future. And that's why this is so important.
All right, did you like that? Yes, and they do art so much better than I do, which is so good that somebody else can do that. I think that does a great depiction of what we want to focus on, this active skill building. And I think the problem with PBIS sometimes is we get so caught up in the parties, the events, that sometimes because it feels good and it's something new to celebrate, but we miss the actual active skill building. That's the teaching aspect. And not just of the students. And so how many of you who've engaged in PBIS before realize, gosh, the students are actually fairly easy, it's the adults? Yeah, no problem, hold your hands up there. Yes, that's exactly right. And we can teach old dogs new tricks, but it's going to take longer. It's going to take a series of repetitions. It's going to take teamwork for you guys to work together to make those changes, okay? And so that's something I want you to think about. Yes, the outcome is the students, but we're going to have to focus on the adults first to have that impact on those students. So again, it gets back to those visions. What is your, not the visions, that's hallucinations, that's not something I recommend in PBIS. It's what is the vision that you have for your school, your classroom, or your district, and then it's going to take leaders to ensure that of those goals that you set up based upon your vision can be achieved. So what's that common language, common understanding? That's starting to come from a functional leading team. Who has the accountability for what, and how are they held accountable? What policies are going to be supportive and not barriers to implementation? How are we going to provide sufficient support? We're talking professional development and technical assistance, the coaching aspect to help, whether it's teachers, roll this out and implement in their classrooms, whether it's principals or supporting all of their classroom teachers across the school. How are we going to do this? And then identifying who are those leaders who have these implementation expectations and actually are going to be, this is part of their annual performance review. We know enough in research that effective leadership is evidenced by teams of individuals who establish a clear vision for change. We know they focus on schools, they create relationships with stakeholders. Stakeholders involves who? The students, the teachers, the community, your families, all right? Engaging in problem solving. Identifying the correct barriers and goals. They apply appropriate strategies based on those specific school needs. They evaluate the effectiveness of their implemented strategies, and they invest in professional development. all of that training aspects that video was showing you. In order to do that, then we've got to be able to implement. And by definition, implementation means to begin to do something, to have a plan, to actually make active, and to roll out. Some people say, why do you put the synonyms up there and the antonyms? Well, because when I go across the country internationally, people know these different words. Oh, to administer, to apply, execute, then that word makes sense to me. But when we're looking at acronyms, I put these up here too, because you've all experienced that at some level, whether personally or whether trying to roll something out within your school and somebody's just ignored it or disregarded what you're trying to do. Here is an example of Florida, our 10 years worth of data of what fidelity of implementation looks like year after year. Here we're able to see the percent of schools that are scoring at least a 70% on the benchmarks of quality, and here's our average benchmarks of quality score. So across our over 1,500 schools, our average score across those schools is over an 80. Right now it's at 88% is the average score, where 75% of our schools are scoring an 88 on that, which is very, very high fidelity. It's one of the highest in all states in the country. We also want to know, okay, if we're implementing, are we making differences? So here we're seeing within the first year of implementation, what kinds of effects are we having? And so for schools, office discipline referrals per 100 students, that first year they're having at least an average 13% reduction across the 1,500 plus schools. Again, that's the first year of implementation. In-school suspension, 18% reduction. Out-of-school suspension, again, for first year of implementation, at least a 2% reduction. So we're seeing reductions, again, not just for the first year of implementation. I'll show you more data of what that looks like year after year when you actually engage in sustaining. Now, our implementation levels, we start with the student here, okay? But then we step back, and there's going to be strategies we need to engage in the classroom. There's going to be strategies the school needs to set up, your expectations, your procedures for dealing with discipline. But then the district needs to look at the student code of conduct. Is it supportive to implementation for PBIS? Is it all punitive based? How can we step back and start to change? Remember, who are the people who are most likely to read the student code of conduct, if anybody reads it? The parents. So let's start out what we expect of parents from the beginning. Let's give the parents the tools on how they can help their child to be successful on your school campus. I'm not saying there aren't consequences, of course there are, but why does it always have to start with the negative? Remember, let's move away from telling them what not to do and move more into what they need to do. Then that goes into affecting what we're doing within Texas, and what Texas is doing is affecting what we're doing on the national level. All right, so in Florida, like I said, we have almost 1,600 schools trained. It's everything from, we've got child care centers. Our project is funded for dealing with pre-K, but we have a whole separate project that deals with child care centers all the way through high schools. So again, there's not one area that it doesn't affect. You're going to find when you start to implement PBIS and strategies and success you're having, it's going to be really good at your family reunions too. Okay, so stages of implementation. Everybody's going to be at a different spot. So some of you are just coming here and exploring it, just kind of thinking, I'll check it out and see if this is something that we have to do. Some of you have actually started to implement it. And some of you might be moving into that full implementation, into the innovation phase. But keep in mind, just because you're in a particular stage of implementation does not mean that it's static. It's a dynamic process. It's constantly moving. You've got new kids that come in. You've got new faculty there. And then you have new administrators that take over. There are times where you may be here, and based on the turnover, you might feel like you have to go back to the beginning, okay? Just remember, what you're maybe going back to the beginning on doesn't mean you're having to recreate all of the activities and tools you developed. It means you're going back to the beginning to get the buy-in of the new stakeholders. All right, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Here's another way of looking at the whole stages of implementation as well. All right, because once we implement, we want it to last. So sustainability talks about provide what's needed, The synonyms for that are to nourish, to nurture. And I like some of the antonyms for this: to dismiss, refuse, reject. And again, it went on and on because I thought all of those, we see all of those at different times. If you come across any of those antonyms in practice, I want you to instantly go, this is somebody who's a barrier to my sustainability here. We're going to have to work on how we work around that, okay? All right, so what's your evidence for sustainability, whether it's in your classroom, in your school, or within your district? Here, we're looking at our 10 years worth of data in Florida. I wanted to know probably about, 6, 7 years ago, if you keep implementing PBIS with fidelity, and you keep getting a high score on the BOQ year after year, do your outcome data match it? So if your benchmark's equality score continues to rise, do you continue to see lower discipline incidents across years? And what we found is that there's two groups of folks, of schools, that we have in Florida. We have low implementers and we have high implementers. Low implementers are defined as anybody scoring a 69 or lower on the BOQ. And you do need to know that the BOQ is only called BOQ in Texas. That's where you guys have cultured it. It's BOQ elsewhere, okay? And I love it. Come to Texas, I instantly have to go into BOQ. And tonight I'm heading to Memphis, I gotta get the BOQ out of my head and call it BOQ. So, anyways, the BOQ, it's the same instrument, just pronounced differently. The BOQ, low implementation, 69 or lower. What we're finding is we get some administrators that say, yeah, we're having results, we're fine with it. It's no problem. We don't need to work any harder than we are. And what we'll say to them is, but you know what? If you implement with high fidelity, meaning you're getting a 70 or higher on the BOQ year after year, you actually have less office discipline referrals than just doing it mediocre. And they'll say, yeah, but life's good enough. And we'll say, you know what? Did you know that there's a 35% difference? You can have 35% less office discipline referrals if you actually started to implement with fidelity. And that gets their attention, okay? And schools are able to sustain that. Let's look at in-school suspension rates. This is where it gets even higher than that. Again, you implement with low fidelity, you do have reductions in your in-school suspension rates across years. But you implement with high fidelity, you're going to have 42% less in-school suspensions if you continue to sustain your implementation year after year with high fidelity. Now let's look at out-of-school suspensions. It's almost a 50% difference. Okay, so I'm telling you this because sometimes we say, hey, the fact that life is better, that it's a little bit less, we're happy with it. But just know, go back to your vision, how could it truly be? And just know that we've got enough data to say you continue to implement with fidelity year after year, you are going to realize it with those effects. All right, scale up. First came out in 1945. What happened with 1945? World War II, right? Just a quick little history lesson for all of you in case you forgot. It's all right, I know it's almost summer. But you think about scale up. We're talking mass proportions of countries involved, mass proportions of folks dying in this process. That's where that term first came up. And what's happening with PBIS is when we started with the National TA Center 17 years ago, we only had maybe like a few hundred schools nationally that we could talk about. And I remember the Fed said to us, we want you to have 10,000 schools, and we were like, ugh, how are we going to get that? Okay, so right now we have officially documented 22,000 schools. We know it's an underestimate. We'd rather be conservative with that. But of the 22,000 schools, that's 22% of our nation's schools that are actively implementing PBIS and realizing the effects. So the thing to think about is when you're talking about scale up, we're talking about it's on a scale of social importance. Okay, so for scale up for you at a school, maybe you've gone through Tier 1 training, but now you're scaling up the continuum and bringing in Tier 2 and Tier 3 so you can clearly address effectively all students efficiently. But when you're looking at a district of scale up, it's when there's those few schools who've stepped forward, they've gone through training, they're realizing the results, administrators are hearing the great things that are happening, and they want it. That's the snowball effect. It's now becoming of social importance to have PBIS in your school. And that's when we start to see the spread of effect across the district. So in Florida, I've been there almost 15 years now. And we started with 33 schools in 2002, 2001, somewhere around there. And basically we were begging, anybody want to come to training? We'll pay you to come to training too, to listen to us for 3 days. And oftentimes after that first year, only 25% of the schools were still implementing. We found out the hard way, because this was years before we knew how important it was to build district capacity. It was also Reading First came out as a major initiative in our state the next year. And the state said you were to do nothing but focus on Reading First. Okay, how well did that work for them? Not that great, because they couldn't get the kids and the student in their seats to actually learn the Reading First. So it had decent curriculum, but we couldn't get them to pay attention to that curriculum and learn. So we stepped back and said, we're going to stop asking schools to come to training, and we're actually going to talk to districts, and we're going to work with district leadership teams. And district leadership teams have got to buy in. And it doesn't mean they have to commit to going district-wide, but it means they have to commit to schools that are engaged in the systems change process. They will support them in this. They will not all of a sudden pull the rug out from under them. So right now I'm in almost 80% of our state's districts. We have only 67 school districts. It's around our county lines. It keeps things simple for me, as opposed to how many thousands of school districts in Texas, yes. So if you are a green district, that means you have an active district leadership team. I meet with your superintendents annually, or my staff do, and we talk about the vision, the goals, review the data, and talk about, based upon that data, what are the best next steps to do, to engage in. And so I get districts up there going, why aren't I green? Okay, we used to joke because Orange County, which for those of you who've gone to Disney World, that's Orange County, and we used to joke that orange was going to go white and is no longer green. And so people would be like, what? That makes no sense. But needless to say, this was a vision that I had. I would love to be in every district in our state. Okay, so I want you guys to think about that it can be achieved. It's taken us about 13, 14 years to get to almost every single district. What if you had that vision that every single one of your students are going to be successfully promoted and be on grade level by the time they exit your class? It can happen, okay? It could happen. So let's talk about the infrastructure. What do we need? That foundation, that basic framework. You know, the infrastructure first came out, this language, around 1927, around the Great Depression time, right? We didn't have the best infrastructure. Things absolutely crashed at that time, and that's where this first term started to come out. So I want you to think about yourselves at your school or your districts that have engaged in PBIS. What infrastructure do you need to keep the system going? What is important? Why should I do this? What should it look like? And we know when we're building an infrastructure, whether it's a school, state, or district, these are the component items, implementation component items we have to look at. Is there funding to support it? What are we going to do for building our visibility? How are we going to disseminate our information? What's the political support we need from all of our stakeholders? Personnel selection. Are we being specific in who we want in key positions to be leaders out there? Are they aware of PBIS? Is there a leadership team that is coordinating, making sure that folks are getting ready and that are knowing that this is a priority within the district or within that school? And then based upon this, what are the actual activities, from the training that occurs to the coaching, what types of data you're using, what feedback you get, and what other types of content expertise do you need? From that, you start to build your local demonstrations. So recruit your stakeholders. Think about, who are your current stakeholders that you have? Okay? Who else do you need to recruit? Why do you need these individuals? And what will you ask of them? What's their role? You know, essentially they'll say, what's in it for me? Everybody needs a purpose. Okay, nobody needs another meeting. But they need to have a role in why they're being invited to a meeting. All right, so the PBIS Implementers Blueprint addresses the school districts and states, we know that they're successful if they have sufficient resources and commitment. They focus on the smallest changes that will result in the biggest difference. They'll establish measurable goals and objectives. They have a clear action plan. They're using ongoing self-assessment, their data, and they have access to an external agent or a coach. Your Region 19 is your perfect external agent to go to for that. All right, main areas to address in building a comprehensive model at your school or your district. And these are the 5 main areas. And so systems preparation, it tends to look like a model like this. Okay, and I'm giving this to you ahead of time because this is going to make most sense for people who have already implemented PBIS. In Florida, we had to sit there and go, what are all the components that we engage in for our delivery model and for evaluation? And this is the final version of it on steroids. And I'm going to go through each different section. So service provision, I'm going to jump around this. And I'm going fast because I want to make sure we get through everything in the allotted time that we end on time today. What do you offer? So if you're a school, what do you offer your students and your families and community members? Okay? Think of the stakeholders. Who's interested in what you have to offer? Who is supporting you? Who is or may be impacted by what you have to offer? Think about Tier 1. Are you offering Tier 1 training? Are you offering Tier 2 supports for your students? Are you offering supports within the classroom? That's where you're taking everything that you've developed for your overall at Tier 1 expectations, and we have clear routines and procedures that are based upon those expectations within the classrooms. For Tier 2, what are you offering on your school campus or within your district? What's the way that you screen your students to identify who's not responding well to Tier 1? And then for Tier 3, what do you offer? If you do offer anything, and I know you do, whether you've had training or not, we have to. We can't wait till we have training. Kids keep coming to school, right? So what supports do you provide when students do not respond well? And who needs training? Your administrators, your teachers and staff, students, family caregivers. Who else may need training? Now let's go back to, this is the result for us in Florida. We provide training, we've got ongoing technical assistance, we have it at the state level, we provide it to the districts, provide it as well as to coaches, and those coaches provide it to the schools. Okay? Now let's think about your evaluation. I want you to go back and revisit your vision. What questions do you have? What do you want to know? So if you're engaged in PBIS in your school campus or within your district, you should think about, is it having an effect? Well, what does that mean for you? Does it mean you have less office discipline referrals? Does it mean that you have more students engaged in instructional time? Does it mean that the parents are filling out the parent surveys and they're satisfied with the supports you're providing? What does it mean for you? Because that's the type of data that you'll want to collect to determine, are you making an impact? Okay? What goals did you establish? Do you need to revisit the goals? Because sometimes we develop goals like, we want everybody to be successful. Well, that sounds great, but can we measure that? Because what success means for one school is going to look a whole lot different for another school, right? And what's successful for one teacher is going to look a whole lot different for another teacher. Yep. So again, we have to think about that. We may have to readjust our goals. So let's think about what types of data might be relevant. You've got Tier 1 data. Okay, how often did you provide training? What are your office discipline referrals? What types of data could you pull from the classroom if that's of interest to you, to want to know if you're having an impact? Again, don't collect data for the sake of collecting data. You've got to have a purpose behind it, a reason for it. Otherwise, you'll never look at it, and people will be mad at you as calling it a paperwork task, and they will start to half-heartedly fill it out, and then the data aren't going to mean anything, right? So make sure it's very clear why you're collecting data. What's the impact on students? Are they improving academically? What would you use to determine that they are improving academically? Are they improving behaviorally? Well, what types of data would show you on your campus that they are improving behaviorally? Again, people satisfied, Here in Florida, we've got 4 or 5 different categories. We've got implementation fidelity data that we look at. We look at the impact on students that we're having. We looked at our people satisfied, because our Department of Education wants that consumer satisfaction aspect. And then we also want to know how well districts are implementing as they're going. Then that jumps to another section. What is it going to take based on what you have to offer, the data that you're collecting? What do you need to do to get folks ready? So at a school level, what do you need to do to get your teachers ready before the students show up on campus? All right, as a district level, what do you need to do to get your administrators ready and to get your teachers ready? And that's that coaching for readiness. And that's where we need an action plan. So in Florida, we're involved in district action planning. We've got readiness checklists. I'm guessing West may have readiness checklists for schools. That's part of those readiness tasks. You've got to get the team ready so they're in the right frame of mind, so they know why they're there. When do you collect, and then we have demographic data that we collect as well. So our evaluation process, you'll have to think about, based upon your region needs or your state, what they've identified, when are the timelines for when data are due? Okay, we all know when the STAR needs to be completed throughout the year, because everything shuts down, right? Yeah, that's kind of a frozen time in Florida as well. Now it's gotten to be like a 6-week time period where we can't step foot in school. But how does it fit your stakeholders' needs? So based on the data that you collect, the readiness activities that are needed, what would be your ideal evaluation process? So think about how often are you going to be looking at your office discipline referral data? When does it need to be entered? Because that's going to make a difference. In Florida, we have mid-year reports, we have end-of-the-year reports. The benchmarks of quality is always due by June 15th every year, one time a year. And then we do some progress monitoring a couple times throughout the year. But what is it for your school or for your district? That's where you need to talk with Region 19 to make sure you're clear about that. And then we get into the evaluation process that we engage in with our districts, because again, it's about building that infrastructure so we can support the implementation. Based on all of this, you develop products and you disseminate it. So you have to think about what types of products would you develop. So as a school, what do you want your stakeholders to know? What do you want your teachers to know about the interventions they've been engaged in? Has behavior gotten better? Has it not gotten better? Okay, what do you want the parents to know? What do you want the students to know? So again, you have to think about what your stakeholders are and how you're going to get that information out. Some of you might put information on your school marquees, you may have a newsletter, you may have something on your school website, the district may have something about PBIS on the website. Again, what information do you want to get out and what's the vehicle in which you're going to get that information out to them? So we have annual reports, we revise our training materials and our technical assistance process, we have an evaluation system for our districts and schools, we've got national presentations that we engage in, scholarly articles, we have a website that gets over 17 million hits a year, and we have online training modules, okay? So again, those are something that we do as a school. You wouldn't have to do all of that, but you have to think about what is it that you want to offer your folks. Based upon this, it's going to help you make informed decisions. Sorry, I have to see a long time. All right, the data drive the products developed. The dissemination process is guided by your stakeholders, and your products and dissemination inform your service delivery model. So do your readiness tasks need to change? Do you need to spend more time building your team up before they go through training and getting them ready? Do your services need to be revised? What you're offering and how you deliver training to your students, for example. Do you need to change it? I know some districts have done a really nice job, but they engage in role-playing with the faculty. They engage in all different types of strategies, and that really helps that change process, that philosophical change process occur with their faculty. And this is, like I said, our overall model. But you may want to fill it in to what yours looks like. And it's something to think about, but you can't do any of it without a vision and without goals, okay? So what's next? We're going to build the infrastructure. How are we going to accomplish it? What do we need to do first? Like I said, you've got to have an action plan. And what's so important about having an action plan? You've got to have that vision, because without the vision, people get confused. People go in different directions. They don't know what you're looking forward to or what you're working towards. If they don't have the skills, remember that video of active skill building, they're actually going to create anxiety because you're asking them to do something that they don't have the skills yet to perform. They don't have incentive. Remember, what's in it for them? They're going to be resistant. How many of you have had many initiatives come and go at your school or within your district? Yes. And so you know what's in it for me. If I hold my breath long enough, maybe PBIS will disappear, right? Because you've seen a lot go by. Yes. So we've got to give folks the incentive. What is this about? Why should they engage in this? Or else you're going to be dealing with resistance out there. You've got to have resources to be able to implement anything that you're doing. If you don't have the resources for it, what happens to people? They get frustrated because you're expecting them to do something without resources to be able to do it. And if you don't have an action plan, you're going to be engaged in a lot of false starts. So that's why it's so important you start with that vision. The skills, the incentives, the resources, the action plan, that's going to lead to the change that occurs on your school campus or within your district. So what are the pieces to your puzzle? What is your vision? How are you going to implement? How are you going to sustain the training that you guys have engaged in and what you've started to roll out? How are you going to keep it going year after year? How are you going to scale up? Do you need additional training? What additional resources do you need for that? And then how is that building your infrastructure? Because you know there's always a new kid that transfers in. Maybe we'll send them from Florida, El Paso. It just tries to trump everything just when you think you got behavior handled. There's always someone who transfers in, right? And the kids who are the most problematic, are they ever sick? No, they're immune to everything out there. Yes. Or they are sick and they keep coming back to school each day. So define and connect your pieces that you've got. This is in Georgia. I wanted to show this to you, and yet this is a statewide plan, and so you guys can think, ooh, good, I'm so glad I'm not responsible for the entire state of Texas, because it is a very big state. But I wanted you to see that what happens when you set up goals. So Georgia has a vision, or their mission is to improve school climate in Georgia schools through PBIS framework. And from this, they have 5 different goals. They've just added a new goal on building the equity through restorative practices. But their first goal is increase awareness and visibility of PBIS. Improve their infrastructure to lead and support PBIS. Increase their training and coaching capacity. Develop an evaluation system and engage their community stakeholders. I'm guessing this wouldn't look a whole lot different for a school, but just on a smaller scale. And I wanted to show this to you because then they broke it down into specific objectives. What's it going to take? And so for them, they said, we've got to create a PBIS brand and a message. We've got to have an elevator speech. We've got to have a logo. And so for you guys at your school, I want you to think, what is your elevator speech? When you get new families that transfer in, or you get a chance, you're in the elevator with the superintendent and you want this in your school, what are you going to say? And it's important that you think about this. Again, so your vision will drive the implementation so that you can successfully sustain as you scale up based on the infrastructure that you've established. Basic recommendations to leave you guys with. Never stop doing what already works. Just the key is make sure you really know it truly works. Okay? Keep the child and the student as the focus. Always look for the smallest change that will produce the largest effect. You don't need to start with big, lofty goals. Okay? You'll get frustrated in the process. Do not add something new without also determining what needs to be removed. And teachers, your administrators will not like me for this, but I will become your new BFF for this. I want you to say to your administrator, when you're put on a new committee, I want you to say, what will I be removed from to be able to do this most effectively? And administrators, I want to challenge you, when you see the need for a new committee, I want to challenge you to say, what is the purpose of this committee? How is this affecting the academic behavioral outcomes? Is this the most efficient method to do this, to engage in this? Okay? I just remember that. All right, do not add something new until you know the foundation established can support it. So don't add more training. Don't add more things to your plate if you have not gotten Tier 1 up and going with Fidelity first. Otherwise, it's not going to last. Use your data for ongoing problem solving and adapt any initiative to make it fit the culture of your school. So in summary, you need that foundation that's going to provide a safe and orderly environment that's conducive to learning. You need the leadership to guide the change. You need data to guide your problem solving. You need effective teaching in your content areas. You need a diverse team-based approach. One person cannot do this all by themselves. And you need to be willing to do things differently. That's going to be the hardest part. Remember, if you're having trouble with the adults and changing behavior, just think, you're one of those adults. Okay, we have to change ourselves. All right, so there's only 3 types of people, really. Those who make things happen. Those who watch things happen. And those who ask. I normally don't quote Ann Landers, but I love that one. So which of these people are you going to be, whether you're going back to your school or district? Okay? Here's some resources for you. This is the Florida website. Like I said, we get over 17 million hits a year. We're getting ready to completely change the face of the website. We've got a ton of modules, videos, tools. Anything that's up on the website is free to take, steal, adapt, do what you want with it. This is the National TA Center. Like I said, we have over 22,000 schools trained. We're in our 17th year of funding. It's the largest or the longest TA center ever from the federal government to be funded. We're pretty proud, and like I said, there's a tremendous amount of resources available on that as well. There is the state implementation of scaling up of evidence-based practices, also federally funded as an option. There's also the Association for Positive Behavior Support for you as well. So again, that has a lot of skill-building webinars and information on that. There's a graduate certificate in PBS that we offer online out of USF. So if people want to increase their skills, they can do it online. There's the National TA Center sponsors the Chicago Forum for Implementers in October. It's a day-and-a-half event. Last year we had over 1,500 people. We're expected for it to go over 2,000. If you have not had a chance to go, I highly recommend this event for you. It's not really in Chicago, it's in O'Hare, Rosemont area, so don't get fooled by the word Chicago. And also the APPS International Conference. So we're going to be in San Francisco in March. So nice place to visit in March if you're interested in going.